Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our latest round of On Track Live or Wardo Wednesday or whatever you want to call it. It's a pleasure to see everybody here. Just a couple of housekeeping items while we get started. Please mute your devices for the initial part of the conversation here so we don't get any background noise. This will be a conversation discussion, so I'll keep an eye on the chat box here. If you want to type in questions as we go in the chat box, we'll keep those for a little later in the conversation. Or when we get to the conversation time, if you'd like to unmute and join the conversation directly, you're certainly welcome to do that. Let me open the screen. I've got a couple of items to go over. Keeping with our format here, I'll give you a little bit of update on some newsy events, and then we'll move into a conversation with our special guest speaker today, who is Ashley Burke, Vice President for the National Mining Association. And thank you, Ashley, for taking the time. Ashley's Wednesdays are busy days. Well, every day is a busy day for Ashley, but Wednesday is an especially busy day for Ashley. They put out a member newsletter and everything today, and we really appreciate her taking time out of the schedule to join us for this little conversation. As always, we'd like to start with a little shameless self-promotion. Remind everybody that the NCTA fall meeting is coming up. Well, first I'll remind you that these On Track webinars are every third Wednesday at 11:30 Mountain Time. If you'd like to do a little shameless self-promotion of your own, Melinda would be happy to sell you a sponsorship for these. And we let you do a little commercial here too. In the meantime, I'll do a commercial for us. The NCTA fall meeting is scheduled for Colorado Springs, September 18th through 20th. We've got a very exciting feature that's been added to the program this year. On Wednesday morning, the 20th, we've arranged a special tour out of the Federal Railroad Administration's Transportation Technology Center. It's a picture of it down there. It's a very cool place. They've got over 50 miles of railroad tracks running around there. This is where they crash train cars and locomotives into walls, and they've got indoor and outdoor facilities where they simulate all kinds of track conditions for the rail cars. They get those rail cars up to a top speed of 165 miles an hour. I don't know if they're going to be arranging a crash for us while we're there, but I'm sure we'll get to see some cool videos and that kind of thing. So encourage everybody to come out to Colorado Springs and join us in September. The weather should be beautiful. We've also, the Cheyenne Mountain Resort's a beautiful location, nice golf course. Just mentioning that, and we will have a little golf event Wednesday afternoon as well if you're interested in that sort of thing. We've also got another webinar in the works with the good folks over at RailLink at our O&M conference. There was a discussion that went on about people not understanding all the services that RailLink has to offer, or some folks that have been experiencing problems with it. We did put out a little survey for folks to feed back to us what they would like to learn from RailLink in that webinar. We've handed those survey results off to our O&M committee, and they're working with the RailLink folks to put the webinar together now. If you didn't respond to that survey and you have questions about RailLink, please feel free to shoot me or Melinda an email, and we'll throw that into the hopper. They're coming up. This is not going to be a canned webinar. They're coming up with something that's responsive to the issues that NCTA members have been experiencing. One more housekeeping item. The NCTA Nominations Committee is currently seeking we have a vacant seat on the board of directors for a utility representative. So if any of you utility folks would like to have some fun with the NCTA board, please feel free to throw your hat in the ring here. You can let me or Melinda know, or contact Emily Regas or John Mayer, who is at Associate Electric, who's the chair of that nominations committee. Also, for those of you who are shippers, keep an eye out. The latest NCTA on-time performance survey is going to be going out here in the next few weeks. Those survey results have been invaluable to us in working with STB and other policymakers. We would invite you to please respond to the survey, even if your rail service is improving. You know, we need to know that. We need to get that documented. So when you get your on-time performance surveys in the email, we really appreciate you taking the time to fill those out and give us a good, vigorous response. And then finally, we need to get the word out on NCTA's member-dependent scholarships. The applications are due in a couple of weeks. You go to the movecoal.org website there on the scholarships page. There's all kinds of cool things. You can print out flyers, pass them around your company. We've got email messages you can send. This is open to all employees of NCTA member companies. So, you know, get it out to the mines and the power plants and stuff. And we give money for both college scholarships and vocational degrees. And over the history of the program, we've given away more than $350,000. So we'd like to keep that up. Please, in the next couple of weeks, if you know anyone or pass the word in your companies, let's get the word out on the scholarship program. So that enough of the self-promotion. Thank you for tolerating all that. Just a quick update on some of the big news since our last On Track Live. Probably the biggest thing that's come out of Surface Transportation Board in the last few weeks here is STB on June 23rd issued a preliminary injunction to compelling BNSF Railway to transport coal for Navajo Transitional Energy Company to their export terminal in Canada. The BNSF has appealed that decision now, so it's still got some regulatory hoops to jump through. But that was, that's kind of big moves. They're telling BNSF they've got to move another 4 million tons of coal before the end of the year. That petition by NTEC attracted a little bit of controversy. Some of the other miners up in the PRB were opposed to it because obviously they're afraid that if BNSF diverts their power to fulfill the NTEC contract commitments, that may get in the way of their coal shipments as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. NTEC also asked STB they filed a common carrier complaint in addition to seeking the order compelling BNSF to deliver those tons. They filed a common carrier complaint against BNSF, and the STB has now set a hearing schedule for that, and that'll be playing out through the fall, which is really interesting. As we've discussed in a lot over the last 2 years of the rail service problems, the common carrier obligation, that's the legal requirement for railroads to serve people who come to them and say, I want to ship things on the railroad. But that common carrier obligation is not very well defined. So this STB hearing, or the proceedings that will go based on this common carrier complaint are going to be really interesting as STB kind of tests their authority to interpret common carrier obligation and see what they can impose on the railroads. At the same time, there's a key piece of legislation that has been reintroduced in Congress, S2071, the Reliable Rail Service Act. That's a bipartisan bill. It's sponsored by Senators Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin and Roger Marshall from Kansas. Senator Baldwin has carried this legislation in previous sessions of Congress and hasn't gotten very far. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out because, of course, this one's coming on the heels of East Palestine and widespread shipper discontent over the service levels the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see if it gets more traction this time as it moves through Congress. But spoiler alert, I'm probably going to ask Ashley a little later on what her opinion is on this Congress being able to get much of anything done. So you can think of your most diplomatic answer to that now, and we'll come back to it later. So that's a really good way to transition to our special guest today. Ashley Burke is the Senior Vice President at National Mining Association. She's been in the communications world for a couple of decades now. We won't reveal how old she really is. Prior to joining NMA in 2016, she was Global Director of Communications for the world's biggest law firm. She's also worked for some multi-billion-dollar manufacturers and public affairs providers to this. She's a great, a great communications professional that our industry is lucky to have working for us. And one of the reasons I asked her to come talk to us today is Ashley just completed a luxurious trip around the country, visiting mining operations, both coal and hard rock mining operations all over the country, shooting a whole bunch of video and things, and she'll be able to tell us what NMA's got in mind for using that stuff. So without stealing more of her thunder, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome Ashley Burke. And I think Ashley's also got some slides to share. So Ashley, why don't I turn it over to you for a minute and let you yak for a minute, and then we can have a little talk.
All right, sounds good. And John, I wasn't aware that I had to think of diplomatic answers to any questions that you might ask. So we might be in a little bit of trouble here.
Well, it's up to you. You don't have to be diplomatic if you don't want it. So.
Well, I am so happy to be here on WRDA Wednesday, and want to talk a little bit about messaging for coal right now specifically. You know, as John mentioned, this summer I have spent a significant amount of time traveling across the country, visiting both surface and underground mines, hard rock and coal, talking to miners everywhere from Nevada across the country to Pennsylvania, West Virginia, for a video project that we are working on here at the NMA that actually just launched today, which you can find the first video in a series on our website, on our LinkedIn, and pretty much soon everywhere across the country, hopefully, if we do a good job in promoting this. But we've really been working to, in this video series, just dispel a lot of the myths that are out there about our industry. I think there are, we've heard anecdotally from our members that there are so many challenges in recruiting the next generations of miners because so many people don't understand, all of the lengths we go to protect the environment, all of the new technologies that are used in mining, and just how great these jobs really are. So you'll see a lot of those topics really tackled in this first video in the series, and we're doing it all through the voices of the great American miners across our country. But one of the things I was really struck by in those travels was that it reinforced for me the need to communicate effectively on their behalf, to tell these great stories, to do a better job in communicating to the public what all of these miners want people to know, and to ensure the rest of America really knows how well these miners are supporting our country. So, as you all know, I'm saying things that everyone on this call knows, but I think it's important just to get our heads around the fact that for coal, we are really on the heels of a global energy crisis, record natural gas prices, grid warnings from the nation's really foremost authorities on what it takes to keep the lights on in this country. And all of that against the backdrop of an EPA that is really hell-bent on ignoring it all. The actions that we're seeing from this administration right now have an unprecedented potential to impact the American people, not generally, but very specifically in keeping their lights on and being able to pay their bills. So we really need to be sure as an industry, as a coal industry, as any industries that generate business from, transport of coal, associated, the power industry, what have you. We have to ensure that we're aligned and using messaging that actually resonates with the general public, and will move them to support our policy positions. So I think here I've got a few things on my agenda, and I'll buzz through them pretty quickly here so we can get to a conversation. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at the NMA, polling and messaging, how we use our messaging, and then leave time for that Q&A. So starting with our communications approach, we really at the NMA have a wide range of ways that we work to influence the public and to advance our priorities. But it all starts with research-informed messaging, because I have a lot of ideas sitting here in my office in Washington on how I should be communicating with the rest of the country, but that probably doesn't matter so much if it doesn't connect with the general public, with reporters that are out there covering us, with members of Congress who are sitting across the street from me right now here in Washington. So I need to do research to inform that. So in the next several slides, I'll get into some of the research that's behind what we're doing and what we're saying. Why do we use polling in our messaging? I have had a lot of people in our industry express skepticism about polling, given the general public's essentially negative perceptions about mining, negative perceptions about coal. And yes, there are people who we all know have strong feelings about what we do and our industry, but there are also a whole lot of people out there who don't know enough about what we do to say one way or another about how they feel about mining. Because of that, I think we really have to be careful to ensure that we're communicating in a way that resonates with that group. And I always call them the movable middle there. And we need to confirm our messaging is relevant and for lack of a better way to say it, worded correctly. For example, if I'm communicating with someone about resiliency, we've all heard us, our industry talk about resiliency, but if the public doesn't know what that means, but they very much understand the concept of reliability, that's much more relevant. And that's how we need to be talking about our issues. We also have to test outside of the group that is on this call, outside of the people who are in my office, and make sure that we're communicating properly in a way that influences outside of the industry echo chamber. Our allies are already with us. I know you all are very supportive of a lot of the things that I'll say on this call. You all also know more about our industry than other people do. So we need to speak beyond people who already know us. And finally, there's a group of people that loves polling more than anyone, and those are our elected officials. So really the easiest way to influence those elected officials is to show them what their constituents want and what they support. And if we can walk across the street and show a member of Congress, look, this has 80% support right in your district, that may move some folks to our side of the issue. So let's talk about that movable middle a little bit here. Just briefly, here you can see the general public's impression of mining and polling we just did earlier this summer. Is the mining industry necessary? Just 55% say yes. What's your perception of the mining industry? Just 46% say favorable. So that's pretty frustrating for me, given that virtually every aspect of our economy relies on mining. But people don't know that, so it's my job and it's all of our allies' jobs to help them understand that. So let's look at the next slide for something that's a little bit more encouraging. So this is that movable middle here in the circle. 30% of people don't know if the mining industry is necessary, and 32% don't know, good or bad, what they think about the mining industry. So just imagine if we could collectively bring people to our side of seeing things. We could end up with 85% of Americans thinking that mining is necessary, and 78% of Americans having a favorable impression of our industry. And to me, that's pretty significant. So We really need to try to do that. So how do we come up with a persuasive message? Communications is not rocket science. There's a formula that's been around for centuries on how to come up with the most persuasive message, and you'll see some of the elements here. You need a credible messenger and message. You need to use practical facts. Use urgency and appeal to an audience's sense of emotion. Make your arguments relatable. And keep it brief, stick to the point. So, Aristotle came up with this, so who am I to argue with that? So what do we do with all of that? We need to figure out what moves our audience at any given time. For example, as you all know, what's important to people during mild weather is much different than right now when you have so much of the country dealing with massive extreme heat. Keeping the power on is very important. Our messaging also needs to be grounded in reality, point to real life examples of why what we're saying is actually true. The hypothetical does not work as well as saying, look, this just happened here. Look at Europe, this happened there. So we want to use specifics. We want to be grounded in reality. We have got to avoid industry jargon. And I came out of the defense industry before this, so I am well acquainted with jargon. I love it. It doesn't work for messaging. You think about the coal industry, and if we talk about losing generating capacity of a certain number of megawatts or generation retired, talk about homes that could be powered by that generation. Talk in practical terms that everyone can understand. And finally, the more we can bring in third parties, the more we can bring in non-industry voices, the more we build our credibility. So knowing that, what do we do for coal? Let's look at the next slide. So remember, if we want to get Americans on our side of policy issues, we have to figure out what they care about. And right now, one of the biggest threats to the coal industry is the EPA's assault on coal plants and coal powered electricity. But that concept, people don't really understand that in the general public. We live and breathe it here in DC. No one else cares really outside of our industry. So how do we get them to care? We know from our polling that Americans are generally supportive of renewables if they're asked about them in a vacuum. But what do they care about more? Well, it turns out they care about what's in their wallets. So here you can see what they think about. When you think about electricity, what's most important? Is it that it's from renewables? No, in fact, it's not. It's that 44% of people want it to be affordable. 41% want it to be reliable. Just 14% lead with the fact that they want it to be from a clean resource. So this tells us when crafting our messages, we got to keep it simple. We have to keep that personal impact, your wallet, your light switch up front as much as we possibly can. So how does that get woven into the messaging that we're putting out there on the EPA? And here you can see we overlay those affordability and reliability concerns into the threat of EPA regulations. So look across here. The more we stick to simple concepts, regulations will increase your bills. Regulations will cause blackouts. The more support we get. The more jargony we get here and impacting reliability, dismantling the grid, we start to see that support fall off. So we just have to very simply, again, this is obviously not rocket science here, but we just have to keep it simple and help people understand the practical impact of these regulations on them. And really, if there are any takeaways for all of us, we have never had a better opportunity to advance our messaging and our goals. Just look around the world, what has happened in Europe, what has happened here in the US with affordability and reliability, with the number of nonpartisan and bipartisan voices out there who are talking about real concerns with reliability. I think the value of what we do is actually very clear, and we can make that case in a credible way through clear messaging. A little bit of what we're doing with those messages. We, on this screen, you can see some of the headlines that we've had out there in the past few months. We communicate not only as a National Mining Association, but with a wide range of third-party voices as well. We have everything from former government officials to academics to you name it. We probably have a voice out there somewhere across the country who is writing on these issues and aligned with us on the messaging front. So, these are just up here a few of our year-to-date numbers, but they really don't reflect the full scope of our engagement. Thinking back to May alone, we did 50 in-depth interviews with really high-profile outlets, walking them through some of what the EPA was trying to do. So that's a really integral part of our strategy, is getting out ahead of the administration, pre-briefing reporters before we know they're going to take action with some of these more damaging rules, and getting our side of the story out there with evidence. So with that, I will turn it over to you, John, and let me see if I can stop sharing my screen, if I know how to do that.
Roll over that little thing up on the top there, and it'll pop down a menu under options, and you can stop sharing there, I believe.
Trying. I've made so many of my windows disappear, but let's see. I'll get there.
No worries. Melinda, are you able to cut her off like the bartender? Or?
Oh wait, here we go.
There we go. All righty, we're back. Thank you, Ashley, for that overview. Especially interesting that point that people have less confidence in polling these days, since everybody's on cell phones and social media. But that fact that politicians still respond to poll numbers is really important for everybody to think and to keep in mind. When I got a chance to look at that first video this morning for the first time, and it's awesome. That's all for public consumption, right? We can share that with all of our members and encourage people to pass that around.
Please do. I mean, this is something that is just a huge issue for our industry, and really, as you all know, for every industry right now. It's so hard to recruit the next generation of talent, and we have so many high quality jobs out there that we really have to spread the word. And in traveling around the country and speaking to these miners, it just blew me away how talented these people are, and how many misperceptions about our industry that they can dispel just by giving them the spotlight and letting them talk.
Right.
And so it was really, really valuable, and hopefully you all enjoy some of the material that we're going to be putting out. So today, obviously, we launched this careers video. We're going to have a series of individual profiles that will come out from that, with individual miners talking about what they do. And then we're going to have several policymaker focused videos coming out. I'm probably going to save those till September, when Congress is back from their leisurely August recess. And so we're really going to take on, in that policymaker video, some of the energy security topics that we really want Congress to be focusing on.
That's great. One of the really interesting things about NMA that I'm not sure all of our attendees today are aware of is, NMA covers both the coal sector and the hard rock sector. And that's an interesting balancing act sometimes for you guys over at NMA. But maybe can you as we talk about the energy transition that is arguably bad for coal but arguably good for hard rock mining, supplying all the things that have to go into batteries and electric cars and all of this kind of stuff. How has this energy transition changed what NMA focuses on, if that makes sense? I mean, bringing those coal and hard rock political interests together.
Sure. I mean, I think it's our messaging at its core hasn't changed. We have always been for an all of the above energy solution, and the absolute worst thing that could happen to renewables advocates is that the EPA succeeds in shutting down all of these coal plants and our entire grid collapses in the way that many of us know that it will. you absolutely need this baseload energy to make the full system work. It's not an either or. And, that's the message that, we bring to Congress, we bring to the administration. And it's so important for people to understand that. And I think for a long time, there are many people who discounted the coal industry and seeing us as an industry that just said no to any regulation, to, it was war on coal. It was, just opposing a transition, whereas there is a very important role that the industry can play in partnership to other fuel sources, to ensure reliability, to ensure affordability. And we know those lessons now. This has been proven out in what we saw across Europe and what we've seen elsewhere. I mean, you look to, we see criticisms of China every single day, but they sometimes know what they're doing. And while they are growing their renewables side of things, solar and wind, exponentially, at the same time, they are still building coal plants because they understand that you can't simply tear down what's there before anything new is there to support it. They know that we need both. And so, it's a very interesting thing to look at. We're seeing this play out around the world, and US policymakers actually have an opportunity to do the right thing, to understand that we can't tear down what we have before we've built anything to replace. Right. And particularly when you look at the massive, I was at a permitting event this morning at the US Chamber of Commerce, where our president and CEO, Rich Nolan, was speaking and participating on a panel. And the permitting in the United States is a mess. And anyone who thinks we're going to be standing up the solar and wind capacity across this country and all of the transmission infrastructure required to support it in time to replace the capacity that the EPA would like to see torn down is kidding themselves. I mean, we have so many challenges to overcome, and so many fixes that are needed within our permitting process, just in the first early stages before anything can get built.
I'm glad you brought up permitting because in my mind, isn't that one of the places where the interests of hard rock mining and coal mining absolutely align? I mean, if the country wants all these electric cars and more solar panels and all those doodads, we're going to have to allow miners to mine stuff. And if you're doing that permit reform for hard rock, the benefits of that should spill over to coal, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there isn't an industry out there and this is one of the things that came up at this morning's event. I mean, we were all aligned, and this is in permitting reform to improve our ports and our transportation systems across the country. I mean, this just needs to happen for every industry that's out there. And so as you see a larger and larger chorus of voices come together on this issue, and people really on both sides of the aisle understanding and appreciating that this needs to happen, it just makes common sense. And Congress seems to be supportive and committed to action. And if we can get this administration in the right spot, that would be more than a step in the right direction.
Right. Just a reminder to everybody, you're welcome to join the conversation. If you've got a question for Ashley, you can go ahead and type that in the chat box and we'll see it, or feel free to raise your little handy thing on there or unmute yourself and butt in and say, hey, I got a question. But I'd love to hear your questions too, if you've got any. On that grid reliability issue, I mean, I used to say this all the time, Americans don't respond to price signals as much for energy because, the gas price goes up and everybody gets mad, and then it comes down halfway and everybody's happy, not remembering that it used to be down here, right? But I was always convinced that, Americans respond to shortage, when the lights go out, um, you know, that may catalyze some kind of an action. But now I'm starting to wonder, we are having the lights go out on a pretty regular basis in California. We've had it happen in red states like Texas. You know, based on all that opinion research you've done, Ashley, do you think people are going to respond, or is the other side just going to be able to gloss that over by blaming the outage on climate change, not on the premature retirement of generating resources, because that's harder to explain?
I mean, I think the days of glossing over this with excuses are over. I mean, we've seen the NMA, when I put together my communications plan for this year, one of the things that I wanted to do was a NMA sponsored reliability event talking about all of these issues. And we didn't have to do that because Congress has been hammering this point week after week, not only on the House side, but also on the Senate side. The FERC commissioners have been hauled up there time and time again and have said one after another on both sides of the aisle, coal is absolutely essential for our grid. We need it now. We cannot do without it. And so, it's provided great fodder for us to use in our communications efforts, just packaging up what the actual experts are. And this goes back to that credibility message. There is nothing you can argue with. I mean, I remember back, 5 years ago, when I first joined the National Mining Association, and we would have debates over, the war on coal. We would have, well, the industry says that. The things that we're saying right now cannot be debated. These are factual. We are sticking to the data that we have. We are sticking to actual reliability events that have occurred. So this is a new day. So I think anyone trying to spin that when these are documented facts is going to come up with a significant challenge on their hands with messaging.
Congress appears to be getting it. You've got members on both sides of the aisle now who are cued into some of these reliability issues. But what is it going to take to get through to the administration? I mean, they don't seem to be getting the message, right?
Well, and this is another area where I would say we are absolutely aligned on the minerals and coal side, with the administration just not getting it in so many ways. I mean, it's incredibly frustrating to see that their actions and the planning at the EPA are really absent any reflection of reality. And these are smart people who have been presented with the facts, who have to understand where we're headed, but are more concerned with the PR around, their objectives. And I mean, it comes time and time again. I know that the administration was very frustrated with the fact that we pre-briefed nearly every reporter out there before they issued their big climate rule back in May, and we were just hammering our messaging. And typically, John, the NMA approach is typically very respectful and cautious, and we don't comment on things before they're released, but we knew where this was headed, and this was not a time that we held our fire, and we are fully prepared to continue to do that because the facts are on our side. We have the data, and this administration continues to ignore it, and in my opinion, that's reckless. And I think a lot of the more and more you hear from grid authorities and people who really know how we keep the lights on, the more you will hear experts say that this path is reckless.
See, that was a diplomatic answer. You know how to do the diplomacy thing.
I don't know if I'm calling the administration's
it was
action
diplomatic
reckless.
and used the word reckless. It was perfect. A little inside baseball, though. I mean, so most people on this call have real jobs and don't pay attention to bureaucrats, but there's a process that rules go through in Washington, not just for EPA, but for every agency. When an agency is ready to propose a new regulation, it has to go through this other office you've never heard of called the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA, which is in the White House. And that body is supposed to evaluate, make sure that the rules are in keeping with what the current administration wants to do, and give other agencies a chance to chime in and say, no, that's going to screw things up for us. But historically, it was also a place where industry could go, and it was kind of your last best chance to head off stupid stuff. But in the current administration, I'm going to focus in on this carbon rule you just mentioned that came out in May. The current administration, EPA brought their carbon rule to OIRA, and OIRA sent it back to EPA and told them to make it worse. And I believe NMA, you all had a request in for a meeting with OIRA to talk about that before it came out, and didn't they cancel the meeting on you?
They sure did. They sure did.
So you know, that checks and balances system within the administration seems to have been totally turned upside down right now, while this administration is on this full court press to try to, in my opinion, do a bunch of things they know are illegal, but try to win by losing by you know, scaring people out of the market. Am I wrong about that?
Nope, not at all. And again, we're seeing this across the board, you know, I'll spare you the details, but on the mineral side, we have a working group process within the administration where they're going to propose a whole suite of recommendations for the hard rock mining industry. And I continue to get calls from reporters who've been briefed on it, but guess who they haven't included in any of those discussions? The hard rock mining industry. and it's insanity. I mean, they are so much more focused on how these steps will be perceived in the public, and focused on briefing reporters than they are on talking to the actual impacted industries and understanding with any clarity what the impact of these actions will actually be.
Yeah, and sticking with that carbon rule, we did have a question from the audience. Is NMA planning to join the inevitable litigation against our latest attempt at carbon regulations?
I have always been coached by my lawyers and our legal team here never to answer questions about what the legal team does. Only our lawyers answer that. But yes, we're obviously very active in all of these issues. I will leave it to the folks on our legal team to determine what they will choose to announce whenever they choose to announce it. But yes, I mean, this is.
But we can confirm that NMA has a robust legal team and is frequently engaged in this kind of litigation.
We do, and we, you know, are constantly working with our members to, you know, determine what their priorities are, and where they want us to be focusing our litigation efforts. And you know, this is obviously one that is very important to a lot of our members.
And again, that, you know, these broader regulations like the carbon regulations, they're not just attracting, I mean, those are attracting concern from a lot of different industries, right? Not just mining.
Absolutely. I mean, and you know, I think anyone who's paying attention to what's being done is realizing that there is, you know, a potential effect that's much broader than any one industry. And so turning a blind eye to what's going on right now is going to have repercussions for many more industries if that's done.
Yeah, well, you just came from the permitting meeting with the Chamber of Commerce people, right? I mean, you know, tell our group what kind of 800-pound gorilla the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is, and how they're getting engaged in these grid reliability and other regulatory issues.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really encouraging to see such a diverse group of industries in one room. I mean, we had you know, Senator Cortez Masto was, you know, did the opening remarks, and then we had remarks from GM. You know, obviously they're concerned in the electric vehicle, critical minerals portion of things, but we also had representative from the ports and, you know, permitting agencies, and, you know, really, you name it, a wide variety of industries were in the room. And it was actually, you know, everyone was in agreement on how much more needs to be done, how much more needs to be looked at through the prism of not just any one industry, but the impact that it has on all, whether it's on infrastructure, whether it's on transportation, whether it's on, you name it, manufacturing writ large. So it was just more of a chorus of voices again, in favor of progress, in favor of bipartisan action from Congress, and people really taking a shared look at our issues as a country.
That's good to hear. Kind of last call for questions. If you got a question from the audience here, shoot it out in the chat or unmute yourself and butt in. My last question for Ashley is going to be, the political one. We've talked a little bit about how in Congress, we seem to be getting some concern and traction on these issues. We've got an administration on the executive branch that appears to be somewhat tone deaf to all of these things. But with the reality of the Congress, a super narrow Republican majority in the House, a Democratic majority in the Senate, is it, and an election season that's starting to spin up now in a big way. Handicap for us. I mean, what kind of things actually can get done in the next 2 years, or are we in a political morass here? What's your opinion?
I'm not a betting woman, but I will say if we can't get permitting reform done, I don't know what we can get done in this country, because there is so much agreement that Congress needs to act. I mean, you hear this time and again from our elected officials, and it's just the right thing for our country. It's the right thing for our competitiveness of our, manufacturing sector. We need to be doing more, because you just see every day a news story about how we are falling behind as a country. And it's all self-imposed, really. We can be doing so much more, and that falls to our elected officials. I don't think we're going to see any help on those things from this administration, which seems to be solving most of its problems in these areas with foreign supply agreements, partnerships with allied nations, what have you, stretching the definition of a free trade agreement, things like that, which we're solving our problems overseas, which is the absolute last thing we need to do. So Congress needs to right the ship here, and I think there's enough political will to do so. And that's really what I hope to see. And but I think if we can't get permitting reform done, I don't know what we can't get done.
That's the big brass ring right now. So that's great. Ashley, anything else you want to add for our group, or?
No. I just appreciate the time. Appreciate you all joining in for this discussion, and anything that you can do to help bolster our messaging and spread the word about what we're trying to do as an industry would be vastly appreciated. And check out that video that we've been talking about and share that with folks, because I am just so proud to be part of an industry that has so many important voices that need to be heard across this country.
Great. We'll include that video in the next edition of the On Track newsletter, so everybody keep an eye out for it there, and feel free to spread it around and share it widely with your colleagues. Again, thank you, Ashley, for taking time out of a very busy Wednesday. Melinda, anything else we need to cover before we break up as a group?
I think you got it all. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you again, Ashley, for an excellent presentation, and appreciate all the work that you're doing back there in our nation's capital. So,
all right, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.